My name is Kimberly Scott. I'm 42 years old, and 4 years ago, I held my husband's hand as his casket lowered into the frozen ground. I spent 1,460 days learning how to breathe again, raising our 10-year-old son Leo as a single mother. But as Flight 412 leveled out at 30,000 feet, Leo grabbed my wrist so hard his knuckles turned white. He leaned close, his voice trembling. "Mom, don't panic. But Dad is sitting 2 rows behind us." My stomach dropped into an abyss. I laughed nervously, telling him he was seeing things. But when I pretended to stretch and glance down aisle 14, my breath caught in my throat. The exact same surgical scar behind his left ear. The exact same gold wedding band on his finger. The man I buried 4 years ago was alive, breathing, and looking straight at us, with a woman holding a baby in his lap. Ever since then, living in Seattle as a corporate accountant, my entire world has revolved around rebuilding a life from the ashes for my son, Leo. The airplane cabin was thick with the low hum of jet engines as Flight 412 leveled out at 30,000 feet. It was supposed to be a quiet trip home. But then Leo gripped my wrist so hard his fingers dug into my skin, his knuckles turning stark white. His face was completely drained of color. "Mom," he whispered, his voice trembling so violently he could barely get the words out. "Don't panic, but Dad is sitting 2 rows behind us." My heart stopped. A cold trickle of sweat ran down my neck. I forced a quiet, shaky laugh, trying to keep my voice steady. "Honey, you know that's impossible. Dad passed away 4 years ago. It's just someone who looks like him." But Leo wouldn't let go. His eyes were wide with pure terror. To calm him down, I unbuckled my seatbelt, pretended to reach for my bag in the overhead bin, and casually turned around to glance down aisle 14. That was the moment the world tilted on its axis. Sitting in seat 14B was a man in an expensive gray suit. The exact same silver hair at his temples, the exact same faint surgical scar behind his left ear, the exact same gold band on his finger. The husband I buried 4 years ago was sitting right there, alive, breathing, and holding a small baby while a blonde woman smiled beside him. And when his eyes met mine, he didn't look like a ghost. He looked terrified. He slowly placed a single finger over his lips, silently pleading with me to stay quiet. My mind raced backward, tumbling 4 years into the past to the rainy Tuesday that shattered my existence. The police had come to my door past midnight. They told me David's car had veered off the coastal cliff, plunging 200 feet into the churning ocean below. The vehicle had caught fire upon impact. Because of the extreme damage, there was no body to view. The coroner confirmed his identity using dental records found in the wreckage, and 2 weeks later, I stood in front of a closed oak casket, lowering a man I thought I knew into the frozen earth. What followed was a living nightmare. David hadn't just died. He'd left behind a trail of financial destruction. Over $400,000 in sudden, unexplained corporate debt landed squarely on my shoulders. I was forced to sell our dream home at a massive loss, downgrade our lives, and work 60-hour weeks just to keep a roof over Leo's head. Meanwhile, David's wealthy business partner Arthur stepped in like a merciful savior, graciously buying up the remaining assets of David's failing firm for pennies on the dollar. I spent 4 years drowning in grief and guilt, believing my husband had succumbed to stress and met a tragic end. Now, sitting at 30,000 feet, the blood rushed in my ears as the horrifying reality finally clicked into place. The closed casket, the unidentifiable remains, the sudden mountain of debt. David hadn't died on that cliff. He had staged the entire thing. For the remaining hour of the flight, the air inside the cabin felt suffocating. My pulse drummed in my ears like a war beat. Every instinct screamed at me to march back to seat 14B and tear down the illusion right then and there. But looking at Leo, who was shaking next to me, I forced myself to stay put. I couldn't make a scene at 30,000 feet. I needed proof. I pulled out my phone, pretending to check my makeup using the front-facing camera. Angling the screen carefully over my shoulder, I zoomed in on aisle 14. There he was. He was whispering into the blonde woman's ear, casually feeding the baby a formula bottle. On the floor beneath his seat sat a sleek, leather carry-on bag. Tucked into the clear pocket was a high-end designer luggage tag. I zoomed in until the digital pixels resolved into crisp black text, Julian Vance, Executive Vice President. He hadn't even bothered to change his last name. He had simply discarded his old identity, and us, like garbage. When the plane finally touched down in Seattle, the seatbelt sign chimed off. Panic flashed through David's eyes as he grabbed his family's bags, desperate to blend into the crowd of exiting passengers. "Leo, stay right behind me," I whispered, gripping my son's hand tightly as we followed him into the bustling terminal. I trailed him past the crowded gates, waiting for the right moment. Near the quieter corridor leading toward the lower-level baggage claim, David broke away from the blonde woman to throw away a coffee cup. I stepped directly into his path, blocking him. "Hello, David," I said, my voice dripping with ice. His face drained of all color. He grabbed my forearm, dragging me behind a concrete pillar, his grip tight and frantic. "If you value your son's safety," he hissed under his breath, "you'll keep walking and pretend you never saw me." Before I could demand an explanation, David pulled his arm back, adjusted his jacket, and melted seamlessly into the airport crowd, disappearing before my eyes once again. But I wasn't the broken, grieving widow he had abandoned 4 years ago. Fear quickly morphed into a cold, burning rage. The very next morning, I reached out to my lifelong friend Elena, a top-tier private investigator who specialized in corporate fraud. Sitting in her office, I handed her the photograph I had taken on the plane and the name from the luggage tag. Julian Vance. "Give me 24 hours, Elena said, her eyes narrowing as she looked at the photo. She didn't even need that long. By that evening, the sickening truth lay spread across her desk in black and white printouts. Julian Vance was currently serving as the chief financial officer for Apex Global Holdings, a massive offshore investment firm. But the real horror was who owned Apex Global. It was the exact same parent firm that had stepped in to save David's original company after his supposed death. David hadn't just faked his death to escape $400,000 in debt. He had orchestrated a massive, multi-million-dollar embezzlement scheme from his own company. He had funneled millions into secret offshore accounts, framed his unsuspecting business partner Arthur for the missing funds, and paid off a corrupt county coroner to sign off on fake dental records from the crash. He didn't run away because he was in trouble. He ran away to start a second, luxurious life with a new wife and child, built entirely on stolen money, while leaving Leo and me to face financial ruin, social disgrace, and years of heartbreaking grief. He thought he was invisible behind his new identity. He had no idea I was about to dismantle it piece by piece. 3 days after the airport confrontation, an unmarked black envelope appeared in my mailbox. Inside was a single printed sheet of paper containing a cold, anonymous warning: "Cease your inquiries immediately. Further digging will jeopardize your financial stability and your son's future." David thought a legal threat would terrify me into silence. He thought I was still the fragile woman who spent nights weeping over his memory. He was dead wrong. Every threat only fueled the icy resolve hardening inside me. "He's panicking," Elena told me over the phone, her voice sharp with anticipation. "He knows you're close, and he's about to make a huge mistake." Elena had uncovered that David's new firm, Apex Global, was hosting an exclusive invitation-only charity gala at the Grand Hyatt in downtown Seattle. The event was designed to celebrate a massive multi-million-dollar merger, a deal that would cement Julian Vance as a major power player in international finance. High-profile investors, federal regulators, and local press would all be in attendance. David thought he was stepping into his crowning moment. He had no idea it was going to be his execution. Instead of hiding, I used a chunk of my remaining savings to buy a last-minute ticket to the gala through a high society event broker. I spent the afternoon getting ready, stepping into a sharp, elegant black dress, the kind of dress a woman wears when she means business. In my leather clutch, I didn't carry lipstick or powder. I carried a USB drive loaded with Elena's forensic audit reports, copies of the fraudulent offshore transfers, and certified police files from 4 years ago. As I stepped into the glittering ballroom, bathed in crystal chandelier light and filled with Seattle's elite, I spotted David across the room, champagne glass in hand, smirking at his guests. It was time to pop his bubble. The grand ballroom hummed with classical music and low, sophisticated laughter. I moved discreetly along the perimeter, keeping to the shadows while watching David, or Julian, hold court near the main stage. He looked so comfortable in his stolen paradise, holding his glass of vintage wine, surrounded by investors who thought he was a financial genius. At 8:30 p.m., the chime of a microphone echoed through the hall. The CEO of Apex Global took the stage to announce the multi-million-dollar merger, calling David up to sign the official documents in front of a swarm of press cameras. David stepped up, flashing a practiced, authoritative smile as he unsheathed a gold pen. "Before Mr. Vance signs those papers," I said, stepping into the center aisle, "I have a quick question for the board." My voice rang out loud and clear over the speakers. The room fell into a stunned, instant silence. Dozens of heads turned toward me. David froze, the gold pen hovering an inch above the paper. His face turned a sickly shade of gray as his eyes locked onto mine. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply walked down the aisle toward the stage, my heels clicking loudly against the polished marble. "I'd like to ask Mr. Julian Vance," I said, raising a microphone from a side stand, "how his previous company's accounts managed to transfer $4 million to a Swiss account under his birth name, David Vance, exactly 2 days after his funeral 4 years ago." Gasps rippled through the audience. Whispers erupted like wildfire. David dropped the pen. "Security! Remove this woman immediately! She's disturbed!" he shouted, his voice cracking with panic. "No one is removing anyone," a firm voice declared from the back entrance. 4 federal agents in dark suits pushed through the heavy double doors, led by my friend Elena and 2 uniformed police officers. The evidence Elena and I had handed to the FBI earlier that afternoon had already cleared the judge's desk. Before the cameras stopped flashing, agents stepped onto the stage, placing David in handcuffs right in front of his new wife, his wealthy partners, and the entire city press. His stolen life had officially collapsed. David's arrest sent shockwaves through the financial world. The trial that followed was swift and merciless. Facing overwhelming forensic evidence, he was convicted of multi-million-dollar fraud, faking his own death, tax evasion, and grand larceny. The court ordered all his hidden offshore accounts seized, granting full financial restitution to Leo and me. The debt that had haunted us for 4 years was wiped completely clean. His new wife, horrified to discover her entire marriage was built on a web of stolen identities and criminal lies, annulled their marriage, and left the state. A few weeks after the sentencing, I drove out to the coastal cliff where David's car had supposedly plunged into the sea 4 years ago. The ocean breeze was cool and fresh against my face. I pulled his old wedding ring from my pocket, the one I had kept in a jewelry box as a painful reminder of grief. I didn't throw it out of anger or sorrow. I threw it out of total liberation. I watched the gold glint in the sunlight one last time before it sank forever into the deep, dark waves. I am no longer the grieving widow hiding in the shadows of someone else's secrets. Leo and I have our life back, built on truth, strength, and a future that belongs entirely to us. What would you have done if you saw a ghost at 30,000 feet? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to mention what city you're watching from.